Hey, how you doing, econ teachers? This is Jacob Clifford. I have for you one of the best activities for Unit 4 Macroeconomics, the financial sector. It's awesome. You're gonna love it. I'm gonna explain the whole thing in this video, so here we go. Now, before we start, I want to give a huge thank you to Chris Cannon from the Georgia Council on Economic Education. Gave me some ideas of an activity he does, which gave me the pieces I needed for the activity that I'm about to show you. Also, I'd love to meet you in person. Last summer, I did some workshops, and it was awesome. It was amazing. You definitely need to come to one of my workshops. You're going to get activities like this one and more, and strategies to actually teach this stuff. And it's not just content. Trust me, it's all about strategies and activities and things to make economics awesome for your students. So I have macroeconomics workshops and a microeconomics workshop. The dates and times and the cost is all on my website right now. Go take a look at the description below. It'll send you the link. Also, I'm going to be making some new econ resources specifically to regular econ classes. So not just AP, but regular econ classes. And in March, I'm going to be doing a special workshop designed only for regular econ teachers. Here in California, you want to sign up for that. Come see me. I'm going to give you all these strategies that's going to make your regular econ class amazing. Now, the name of this activity is called Risk, Rates, and Returns. And basically, students are becoming the loanable funds market, with some of them being businesses that are looking for a loan and trying to borrow, and the other portion of the students being bankers lending out the money. Now, this activity will take at least 50 minutes to run with your students, and I'm gonna give you the PowerPoint and the worksheet to run the activity, so sit tight. First thing you gotta know is the students have a goal. Their goal is to earn as much profit as they can by negotiating favorable interest rates and avoiding defaults. The learning objectives: identify how interest rates are determined and how they're related to risk and returns, identify how changes in expected inflation affect nominal interest rates, calculate real interest rates, use effective negotiation skills, and observe how monetary policy influences interest rates. Now, this last one you don't have to do, but I put it in there so you can kind of connect it with all the other concepts students learning in Macroeconomics Unit 4. Now, these are all the terms that students are going to learn and practice in this activity. Keep in mind, they've learned them all already. You've already kind of taught these concepts. Again, this is just kind of solidifying concepts in their brain. Now, because everybody's class size is different, you got to make some adjustments that work for you. Basically, there's 12 different businesses, and the way I set it up, because I have big classes, would be each business is ran by 2 students together. So that's a total of 24 students are businesses, and the remainder 10 students or so, or even more, are going to be the banks. The students that run the banks have to understand what they're doing. They're probably some of your strongest students in the class, the real negotiators, the ones that really get what's happening. The reason why is because they're going to be bombarded with people, oh, I want to borrow, I want to borrow, I want to borrow. What I'm trying to tell you is pick your really strong students to be the bankers. Now, for the room setup, what you want to do is have 4 bankers in each corner of the room. So the students are behind a table. There's like 2 or 3 people representing the bank, and each corner of the room has a different banker. Okay, that's all the teacher stuff. You wouldn't mention that to your class at all. Just when the students walk in the room, say, okay, I need this person, this person, this person. I need you to be my bankers. Go ahead and pick a partner that you're going to work with. You guys, my bankers, and then move them and sit them in the corners. And the other students, and I talk to them, you're all going to be businesses. You will remain a business and bank the entire time, and there's going to be 4 different rounds representing 4 different years. Now, each year, a business is going to get a loan from a different bank or the same bank for the total amount they need. Businesses can't borrow, half the amount they need from one bank and the other half from another bank. Each business has a name, a number, a loan amount, and each one has a potential revenue and a chance of default. What I like to do at this point is actually break out the cards. I have cards set up, and so what I do is I'll go to the businesses now. So I actually set it up in the room where all the students are all kind of up against the wall. So walk up to the first person, say, pick a card. And they pick, let's say they pick 6. That means their business 6, which is Taekwon Donuts. Okay, that's gonna be their business. And then I go to the next group of students, 2 students who represent the next business, and they pick 3, and 3 is gonna be Taco about it. The reason I do this is because if I give students individual businesses, okay, you guys are going to be this business, they can complain to me and say, well, ours has a high chance of default. If they're the ones picking the card, then it's up to them. They're the ones that pick the card, and it was all chance and all fate. And so again, there's 12 different businesses, so I just have 12 different cards. Take a look at the worksheet. You can see it's actually right here. This tells you the business name and the loan amount that each business is going to need, and then their default card. Now, their default card, and I explain this in the PowerPoint as well, is the card they're gonna pick to default after they get the loan. So in the round, they're gonna walk around and negotiate an interest rate with different banks. And at the end, they're gonna come to me, tell me their interest rate, we're gonna record their interest rate, and then they gotta pick a card. Now, the chance of default depends on their default card. For Wanna Pizza Me, which is business number 1, they have a loan amount of $10,000 and their default card is 2 of spades. That's the only card that if they pick the 2 of spades, they're gonna default on this loan. Now, obviously the chance of defaulting is extremely low. So let's go ahead and randomly pick, and 5 of spades, they're fine. And this card tells them how much money they earn. So what students do after round 1 or year 1, they negotiate, and during round 1, they negotiate a nominal interest rate and they shake hands with the bank. And then at the end of that round, they come to me. When they come to me, they pick a card. Let's say your business 1, Wanna Pizza Me, they had a $10,000 loan and their default card is the 2 of spades. Now, if they pick this, which is the Jack of clubs, they obviously didn't default. Woo! And this chart right here shows them how much money they actually earn. This is their revenue of $30,000. This chart is key. Students get a copy of this. This shows you how much money you earn when you actually pick a card after each one of the years. So at the end of each round, businesses are gonna pick a playing card out of a deck of cards to determine how much revenue they earn. So revenue is up to chance. They have no ability to control how much revenue they have. What they have is the ability to determine their interest rate, right? How much they're gonna have to pay to borrow money. So that's the negotiation part, and then luck comes down to the actual cards. So the business's profit is gonna be the total revenue that they get based on the luck from drawing a card, minus the cost of taking the loan, right? So in this case, it says if a business earns $20,000 of revenue and they borrow $10,000 at a 10% interest rate, then their profit is the $9,000, right? $20,000 revenue minus $11,000 to pay off the principal and the interest on that loan. So again, the revenue businesses earn is determined by the card that they pick, and the chances of default is worked into the system. If they default onto a loan, if they default, it's gonna cost them $10,000. So even if I borrowed $40,000 or $10,000, it doesn't matter. It's always $10,000 loss when you default on a loan. It's also $10,000 loss for the bank. So the bank is gonna be out $10,000 as well. Again, I know this is not very realistic because the amount of the loss from a defaulted loan depends on how much you borrowed. Again, we're gonna keep it really simple. What you have your students do right now, have them calculate the chance of default for each one of these. And students, they understand intuitively the idea that, okay, 2 of spades, it's a very small chance. However, a spade and a diamond for business 12, pun and games, that's 50% chance that you're going to default on that loan. Side note, it's actually really easy to calculate this with your students. It says approximation. The reason why, let's look at Pasta La Vista, there's the 2, 3, 4, and 5 of spades. Those are their default cards. If they pick any one of those 4, they're gonna default. There's 4 cards out of approximately 50. That's basically 8% chance of default. And it doesn't really matter if they actually calculate the exact percent chance of defaulting. Now, that said, take a look. Banks earn profit by lending money by earning interest rates and avoiding defaults. Now, because it's really hard for students to calculate, 2.785 is the interest rate, banks can only charge 1, 2, 5, 10, 15, 20, or 25% interest, nominal interest rate, that is it. Now, when year 1 actually starts, the actual interest rate that any bank's gonna charge any business depends on the business, right? The business is gonna walk up and the bank's gonna size them up, ask them some questions, and decide if they wanna lend to them. If they don't, then they don't. And if they do, what rate do they wanna charge? And is that lender gonna be undercut by a different lender, right? Can that borrower go get money from another person at a lower interest rate? At the end of each year, the loan's gonna be paid back, so banks can't make multi-year loans. So you can't say, okay, for the next 2 years, you want $10,000, but I'm gonna give you $20,000 for the next 2 years. They can't do that. The cost of a default, if you lend to someone and they default, it's gonna be negative $10,000 towards your score. At this point, students are a little confused. It's okay. Have them answer questions 1 and 2. This will kind of give them an idea of actually what's happening here. Question 1, are you a borrower or a lender? Do you prefer higher interest rates or low interest rates? This is actually important for students to understand, wait a second, because if they're out there negotiating as a borrower super high interest rates, say, no, I'll give you 15. No, I want 20, right? That's a problem. So students need to identify, are you the borrower or the lender? Do you want a high interest rate or lower loan rate, and they explain. And then question 2, what prevents any one bank from offering loans with extremely high interest rates? You want to drive home this idea that there's some competition. If you don't like the rates from one bank, go to another bank. If you're not already confused enough, I have something else that you can add on. This might actually help you solidify other concepts that students have learned. It has to do with expansionary monetary policy. So take a look. I tell the students, all right, we're gonna run the activity in a second. Before we do so, each bank has the same bank balance sheet with assets and liabilities. And you can see the liabilities is $100,000 people have deposited into this bank, and they have excess reserves of $10,000, treasury bonds of $60,000, and consumer loans of $30,000. And I ask these students these questions. Again, this is outside the realm of this activity, but it's gonna help students see other concepts that they've learned in Unit 4, the idea of monetary policy. So first question, given this information, what problems would occur if we just started year 1, ready and go? Well, the excess reserves are only $10,000, and all these different businesses need a whole lot more than $10,000. So we have a problem. There's not very much money to be loaned out because banks don't have much money in excess reserves. So next question, if banks have very little money to lend out, would interest rates be relatively high or relatively low? Well, they'd probably be high. Right? They'd be higher because if I only have $10,000 to lend out, I'm going to charge the highest interest rate possible and only go with the one person. So basically money is really tight. When money's tight, then that's going to cause the price of money, interest rate, to be higher. Next question, would investment spending be high or low? Remember, investment spending is spending on machines, tools, and factories, things for these businesses. Well, it's going to be low, right? If very few of these businesses can actually borrow in the first place, then investment spending is going to be very low. When interest rates are high, investment spending is going to be low. Next question, what could the central bank do to promote more lending and increase investment spending? This is asking them about expansionary monetary policy and connecting it. Here's the best part, connecting it to the bank balance sheet that students learned earlier in the unit. By the way, if you teach regular econ and this is above your pay grade and you don't really talk about bank balance sheets, you can skip this entire part. So basically, students need to understand that the central bank can buy those treasury bonds. And if the central bank buys those treasury bonds, those $60,000 of treasury bonds, that causes treasury bonds to go down to zero, and that means this bank now has $60,000 more to lend out in excess reserves, or a total of $70,000 of excess reserves to lend out. And what's going to happen to interest rates when now there's all this money? Well, interest rates are likely going to fall. And that's the idea of expansionary monetary policy. Like I said before, if you want to skip this part, you totally can. Just tell your students and your banks particularly, you have $70,000 to loan out in each year. That's it. That's all. And it doesn't change, by the way. So you don't have, $70,000, you made some profit, now you can, loan out that profit. Just to keep things simple, every single round, banks have $70,000 to lend out. Even if they lose, let's say 2 of their businesses default, and that was, negative $20,000 total towards their score. That doesn't matter, ignore it. You still have $70,000 to lend out each one of the years. Now, if you're a little confused by now, don't be. Here's the reminder, the big overview. First thing, banks have $70,000 a year to loan out. Be sure to record that if you're a bank, so don't, lend out $90,000. Also, banks do not need to lend all their money each year. If they don't want to lend out money, they don't have to, but then they don't earn profit. Businesses can borrow from any bank each year. Feel free to shop around. Businesses must get a loan from the total amount that they need. So if you are Thunderwear and you need $30,000, you need to get $30,000 from a bank. You can't get 15 from one and 15 from another. Next one, the terms of the loan cannot be changed once the bank and the business agree. Once you shake hands, the deal's done. So if you're a business, don't go off to another bank and try to get a different loan. And if you're a bank, you can't say, oh, no, we're not gonna lend you anymore, we're gonna go to somebody else. Once the deal's done, you record it, it's done. And then right here, the cost of default is $10,000 for the business and the bank. And again, there are set interest rates, 1, 2, 5, 10, 15, 20, and 25. Nominal interest rate is all banks can charge. Last thing I wanna show you is there is a part of the worksheet where students are going to keep track of all this stuff. And so you can see right here, there's an overall summary where students have to keep track of the nominal interest rate and the total amount of revenue earned by each one of the businesses in each one of the years. And you also want to put this up on your whiteboard, by the way, so you have it all up there in front of you. You can kind of refer to it as you debrief each one of the years. Also, the individual students are going to keep track of their individual score as well. And so each bank's gonna keep track of how much money they're earning, and each business is keeping track of how much money they're earning. Whew, that is a lot of instructions for just one activity, but I promise you it's worth it. Like I said before, there's a lot of great aha moments in this activity. So here we go. Year one, students are ready to go. You've been talking all this time. Now they wanna go and start negotiating. You tell them the expected inflation rate is 1%. So there is inflation here of 1%. Ready and begin. Right now the businesses go off to the different banks. The bankers are talking to them, negotiating. I want 25%. Oh no, how about 10%? Someone finally comes to you and says, okay, you walk up, what are you again? Oh, we're business 3, which is talk about it. And okay, pick your card. And it is a club, not a spade. A club for them brings in $30,000, right? And they record that right here on their piece of paper for themselves and for the overall group. And what you want to do is you want to record that on the wall, and so students can see what the rate is, and they can kind of see who's making money and how much money they're actually earning. So after year one's over, everyone sits down. Each one of the businesses are going to calculate and record on the business record sheet the principal, the loan amount, the interest rate, the principal and interest together, the actual revenue they earned from picking the cards, and then their profit. So they're calculating their profit. So here we go, debrief questions. Were any businesses unable to take out a loan? You ask students why not? If it's gonna be one, it's gonna be because they have a really high chance of default. Which businesses had the lowest interest rate? The numbers will show this, the ones that had the lowest chance of default. So the more risk, the higher interest rate. And that's like a key concept students need to learn. That's, topic 4.1 in macroeconomics, AP macroeconomics, risk and rates and the relationship between the two. Next question, which businesses had the higher interest rates? Again, higher risk, higher rates. Why is it unlikely that any bank offered a 1% nominal interest rate? And the answer was because inflation was 1%, and so they wouldn't make any profit. If I gave you a 1% loan and inflation is 1%, then the actual real profit the bank's gonna earn is gonna be nothing. So they obviously charge a little higher than 1%. In general, what is the relationship between risk and interest rate? Again, in round one, I'm just trying to help my students realize the relationship between interest rates and risk. When you debrief the activity, tell the students the actual inflation rate was 1%. So it was expected to be 1%, and it ended up being 1%. So the banks can start calculating the nominal interest rate, the real interest rate, and their profit as well. Now, before you move on, have the students answer question 3 right here. Year one, in general, what is the relationship between risk of default and interest rate that businesses pay? Use a specific example to support your conclusions. Year one is over, and you can go a little quicker now because students understand kind of what's going on. In fact, most of this activity is kind of set up, and the whole last third is the actual activity itself. And by the way, spend some time talking about who defaulted in the bank. It's like, oh man, I lent to you, darn it, there was only a 16% chance that you were gonna default. And they're like mad at each other, which is hilarious. Okay, here we go. Year two, expected inflation is 1%. You tell students, okay, it doesn't matter what happened in the last round, if you defaulted or not. Each bank still has $70,000. You're back to however many, loan amount you needed on your paper, ready and go. And they go off again and they start negotiating with each other again. And again, they walk up to you as they negotiate and they have their numbers. They pick a card, you walk up, okay, who are you? And they say, I'm Thunderwear. So any spade is your default card. They pick a card, it's a spade, default. And you write that up on the board. So basically the students are sitting down and calculating their results, and then you stop the round, okay, done, let's debrief this activity. Students put their pencils down and you ask them some questions. So were any businesses unable to get a loan and why? Who had the low interest rate, who had the high interest rate? These are kind of establishing what happened and any differences between year one and year two. And there really shouldn't be very many differences between year one and year two interest rates. It turns out though that the actual inflation is 4%. So it's not 1%, it's 4%. Now, the next question is right here. How do lenders calculate real interest rate? And the students on their paper are going to look at question number 4. How do lenders calculate real interest rate? Did the real interest rate increase, decrease, or stay the same in year 2? And explain, right? So now students are connecting the Fisher equation, nominal and real interest rates to inflation and trying to go, okay, what's going on here? What happens to real interest rate when the actual inflation turns out to be greater than expected inflation? Well, the real interest rate is gonna get smaller. The actual rate of return is a lot smaller. And who does this help and who does this hurt? Those are huge concepts on the macro exam. This activity solidifies in their brain. A banker goes, oh man, you telling me it's not 1%? and that they can actually feel that because it affects their score. By the way, there is no effect on the businesses. I wanted to work in, real and nominal into the profit, like real profit or nominal profit. Ignore all that stuff for the businesses because that's not, again, if you make an activity too complicated, you'll lose the students. Year 2 is trying to show the students this idea of real and nominal interest rate. Year 1 was about default and nominal interest rate. Year 2 is about calculating real interest rate. I wonder what year 3 is going to be about. So at this point, the banks are calculating their profit and recording it down, adjusting for inflation, keeping in mind that there's that 4% inflation. All right, you make sure everybody's ready. All right, here we go. Year 3, let's do it. Because year 2 had 4% inflation, it's probably safe to say that year 3 has 4% inflation. So expected inflation is staying up there at 4%. Ready and go! Now here's the best part of the activity. You train and teach the students academically that when the inflation rate goes up, nominal interest rates go up. Of course they do, but now they really experience it. Now they're a banker and they're thinking, okay, last time I gave you a loan for 5%. I can't give you a loan for 5% anymore. Inflation's now 4%. Right? So I'm going to have to increase the nominal interest rate. And that's exactly what happens. Across the board, for every business, nominal interest rates have a tendency to go up. Sometimes they don't, and it's not perfect. But if you look at all the numbers, in general, all the nominal interest rates, all go up. Okay, all the students sit down. Then you say debrief questions where any business is not able to get a loan. Why? Which business had the lowest interest rate? Which one the highest interest rate? So students can see this connection. Then you get to the best part, which is coming up. What happened to the nominal interest rates? Well, nominal interest rates, you look at the numbers and point to it and say, look, before they paid 5%, now they paid 10%. They paid 20% before, now they're paying 25%. And the students can see that nominal interest rates went up. But it turns out the actual inflation was 8%. And you can hear the banks, they all lament, oh, come on, what? But what happens to lenders' real interest rate as a result of a higher nominal or higher inflation? The real interest rate's gonna fall and the banks are gonna be even worse off. So lenders are hurt by unanticipated inflation. And that's the goal of year 3. Take a look at question 5. Students would fill this out. Year 3, in general, did nominal interest rates in year 3 increase, decrease, or stay the same? Explain why. So now students are explaining why nominal interest rates went up because inflation went up. And when inflation goes up, that's going to cause the nominal interest rate, or expected inflation goes up, nominal interest rates are going to go up with it as well. So again, year 1 is risk, understanding rates. Year 2 is establishing real interest rate. How do you calculate it? Year 3 is talking about how inflation affects nominal interest rates to go up. I wonder what year 4 is going to be. But before you get to year 4, you have the businesses calculate their profit, the banks calculate their profit. You make sure everyone's ready. All right, here we go. Round 4. Clearly, there's going to be high inflation because they're expecting higher inflation. So it's going to be an 8% expected inflation. All right, ready and go. They start again. Remember, each bank still has $70,000. It doesn't matter if they had a default or not. So year 4, students are negotiating, walking around, getting loans, keeping in mind that inflation is 8%. They're walking up to you, they pick a card. So during the debrief, you say who got a loan, who didn't, what was the lowest interest rate, who had the highest interest rate. You kind of go through that pretty quickly. And then in general, did nominal interest rates increase or decrease or stay the same? Nominal interest rates still went up because inflation went from 4 to 8%, so nominal interest rates still go up. So now nominal interest rates are stood through the roof, but it turns out actual inflation is 5%. And you hear from the banks go, oh yeah! Does this help or hurt lenders? And the banks are happy because now when they actually calculate their real profit, we're lending out money expecting 8% inflation. It turns out that it was 3% less than that. And then they actually calculate that as well. Now that is a lot harder for the businesses. It's not that hard to calculate their actual profit. The banks, it's pretty tricky. They establish the nominal, calculating the real, and then using that real to calculate their actual profit. That's pretty tricky. The 4 years are over. Students have their results. You can talk about it during the very end. The students actually answer one more question for question 6 in year 4. Did the real interest rate increase, decrease, or stay the same in year 4? Explain why. So in year 4, the real interest rate actually increased because actual inflation was less than expected inflation. So in this case, real interest rates actually increase, and students again are understanding that concept. Last, question 7. List several factors that influence a lender's decision to lend. And students will point out, and this will kind of really, like I said, solidify all the concepts they've been learning in the financial sector. It has to do with how much banks have to lend out, the excess reserves of banks. It has to do with the risk of the individual lenders. It has to do with inflation. Inflation is a huge factor, whether I lend out and what rate I lend out. Of course, at the end of the activity, there has to be a winner. So you say, okay, let's calculate your total profit for the businesses, and you find out which one of these businesses had the total profit. And of course, the banks as well are gonna tell you who won it from the banks. You're gonna find out, because the $10,000 loss from a default, a lot of your banks are actually gonna be in the red, which is a whole different lesson. Poof! So that is it. That is risk, rates, and returns. It's a doozy of an activity because there's a lot of moving parts, but I'm telling you, it's totally worth it. Anytime students can create their own numbers, right? When you're talking about, let's just say the nominal interest rate is 10 and let's say the inflation rate is 3. What's the real? That's not as effective as having students. They negotiated their nominal interest rate. Again, I'm giving you access to these worksheets and these resources. Just follow the link in the description below. That's gonna send you to my website. It has actually a page with all of some of the products that I sell. On the very bottom, there's a section that says free stuff. Click on that. It'll give you the download worksheet for this. It's a PDF that you can fill this out with your students, and also give you the PowerPoint that I've been showing you that shows you kind of the rules and how you set this whole thing up. Also on my website, you're gonna see several stickers that I sell. They're kind of for fun. If you like my videos and the new videos I'm making with all the things on the wall, you'll love some of these stickers, like the demand sticker. These are kind of like specific to what I do, and so obviously, milk demand doesn't make sense unless you've seen my video, and then it does make sense. Anyways, thank you so much for watching my videos. Please subscribe to this other channel. I hope I get a chance to meet you in one of my workshops. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time.